The knock was sharp, 3 quick raps against the wooden door, urgent, demanding. Aamir's heart jumped. It was late, too late for visitors. His mind raced through possibilities. A neighbour? A mistake? But when he peeked through the peephole, his stomach tightened. A policeman. Tall, broad-shouldered and dark-skinned, the officer stood firm, his hand resting near his holster. His face was unreadable, but his stance carried authority. Aamir hesitated before unlocking the door, his fingers unsteady. As soon as the latch clicked, the officer pushed the door open and stepped inside without waiting for permission. "Good evening," the officer said, his deep voice measured. His eyes swept across the room, scanning everything in a way that made Aamir's throat dry up. I didn't call the police," Aamir said, confused. His own voice sounded weak. The officer turned his gaze to him. It was sharp, assessing. "Are you alone?" Aamir frowned. "Yeah, why?" A pause. The officer's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Are you sure?" Something in his tone, something about the way he asked, sent a chill crawling up Aamir's spine. He took an unconscious step back, suddenly feeling too exposed, too vulnerable. The air in the room felt heavier, like it had thickened. "Yes," Aamir said, his voice quieter. "I'm alone." The officer exhaled, barely nodding, but his shoulders didn't relax. He looked around again, his hand still dangerously close to his holster. "Has anything unusual happened today?" he asked. Aamir's pulse thudded in his ears. The question sounded simple, but it carried weight. He thought about it. Was something off? No, not really. Just a normal evening, a normal night. Until now. "No," he said slowly. "Nothing." The officer didn't react immediately. Instead, he stepped deeper into the house, his boots making soft, deliberate sounds against the floor. The door was still open behind him, letting in the cool night air. Aamir had the overwhelming urge to run, though he had no idea why. Then, suddenly, click. The officer reached behind him and shut the door. Firm, final. Aamir's breath hitched. Every nerve in his body screamed at him. The officer turned back, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke, his next words sending a jolt of fear through Aamir's chest. "We need to talk. Now." The air inside the room had shifted. It was no longer just a house, it felt like a cage. Aamir's heartbeat pounded against his ribs, his mind clawing for an explanation. Why had the officer shut the door? Why did he look so tense? Aamir swallowed hard. What do you mean we need to talk?" The officer didn't answer right away. He took a slow step forward, his boots pressing into the floor with a quiet but deliberate weight. The dim ceiling light cast sharp shadows on his face, making his expression even harder to read. "My name is Officer Malik," he said, his voice low but firm, "and I need you to listen to me carefully." Aamir crossed his arms, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. "I don't understand. Why are you here? I didn't call the police." Malik exhaled through his nose like he was debating something. Then his next words sent a chill down Aamir's spine. "Who is Rayhan?" Aamir's brows knitted together. "What?" "I said," Malik's tone sharpened, "Who is Rayhan?" Aamir shook his head, confusion tightening around his chest. "I don't know any Rayhan." Malik's jaw clenched. He studied Aamir's face as if trying to detect a lie. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Then the officer's radio crackled. A faint, static-filled voice came through. "Unit 4, status update, report in." Malik didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He just let the radio hiss and pop, ignoring it completely. Aamir's stomach twisted. Something about this felt wrong. A real cop would respond, right? A real cop wouldn't ignore a direct call. His eyes flicked down. Malik's fingers were still resting too close to his holster. Too close. A cold wave of realization crashed over him. Is he even a real cop? Aamir took a slow step back. His breath came quicker now, his palms damp. Listen, man. I don't know what's going on, but I think you should leave. Malik's eyes darkened. I can't do that. Aamir's back hit the wall, trapped. A long, heavy silence passed between them before Malik finally spoke again. This time his voice was quieter. Someone is watching your house. Aamir's breath caught. Malik glanced toward the window, his body language stiff, controlled. I was sent to protect you, but you need to trust me. Aamir's chest tightened. His ears were ringing now. None of this made sense. None of it felt real. And then, crash. The window behind him exploded into a spray of glass. A gunshot. Aamir barely had time to drop to the floor before another bullet tore through the room. Glass shattered like an explosion of ice, sharp shards raining onto the floor. The gunshot's deafening crack still echoed in Aamir's ears as his body hit the ground, Malik's firm grip yanking him down just in time. A second bullet tore through the air, embedding itself in the wall where Aamir had been standing seconds ago. His heart pounded wildly, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Stay down, Malik barked, his voice edged with urgency. He had already drawn his weapon, his body positioned protectively between Aamir and the broken window. His eyes darted toward the darkness outside, scanning for movement. Aamir's mind raced. What the hell is happening? Who's shooting? His entire body trembled as adrenaline surged through his veins. This wasn't some misunderstanding. Someone wanted them dead. Another gunshot. The bullet whizzed past, too close. Malik didn't hesitate. He returned fire, his movements precise, controlled, like he had done this 100 times before. Aamir flinched at the loud bursts, his body curling inward. Get to the back door, Malik ordered, his voice sharp. Now! Amir's legs felt numb, but instinct took over. He scrambled toward the hallway, his hands slipping on the floor. Malik followed, his gun still raised, moving like a soldier in a war zone. Then, a shadow moved in the hallway. Aamir froze. His breath caught in his throat. A tall figure stepped forward, silhouetted against the dim light from the street lamp outside. He was holding a gun, his grip relaxed, confident. But it wasn't his weapon that sent chills down Aamir's spine. It was his face. He knew this man. Aamir's mouth went dry. His thoughts blurred together in disbelief. No, it can't be. Rayhan? The name escaped Aamir's lips before he could stop it. Rayhan, his brother's old friend. A name from the past, from a life Aamir had left behind. But now, standing there in his hallway, Rayhan wasn't just a memory. He was real, and he was armed. Rayhan smirked, tilting his head slightly, his dark eyes locked onto Malik. Didn't think I'd find you so soon, officer. Aamir's stomach dropped. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. This was about Malik. The truth hit Aamir like a punch to the gut. Malik hadn't just shown up at his house by chance. He was hiding, running. And Rayhan had come to finish something. Rayhan raised his gun. Malik didn't wait. He lunged. Rayhan's finger curled around the trigger. The gun was aimed straight at Malik's chest. But Malik moved first. With lightning-fast reflexes, he lunged at Rayhan, knocking the gun to the side just as the trigger was pulled. The shot rang out, a deafening explosion in the small hallway. Aamir flinched, his ears ringing. The bullet missed its target, slamming into the ceiling. Malik didn't stop. He drove his fist into Rayhan's ribs, forcing a guttural grunt from the man's throat. Rayhan staggered back, but he wasn't going down that easily. He lashed out, slamming an elbow into Malik's jaw. The crack of bone meeting bone sent a shiver through Aamir's spine. For a second, Malik faltered. That second was all Rayhan needed. With a vicious snarl, Rayhan grabbed Malik by the collar and drove him into the wall with a sickening thud. Malik groaned, his head snapping back. Aamir watched, frozen, his breath stuck in his throat. He wanted to help, he had to do something, but his body wouldn't move. Malik struggled against Rayhan's grip, but Rayhan was ruthless. His fingers tightened around the cop's throat, his face twisted in fury. "You should have stayed out of this," Rayhan hissed. Malik's face was turning red. His fingers clawed at Rayhan's arm, but his strength was fading. Aamir felt his chest tighten. "He's going to kill him!" Without thinking, he grabbed the first thing he could, a broken glass shard from the shattered window. His palms burned as he clutched the sharp edges, but he didn't care. With a burst of courage, Aamir lunged forward and slashed the shard across Rayhan's arm. Rayhan roared in pain, his grip loosening for just a second, but a second was all Malik needed. Gasping for breath, Malik twisted out of Rayhan's hold and slammed his forehead into Rayhan's face. Blood sprayed from Rayhan's nose. He stumbled, dazed. Malik didn't hesitate. He spun Rayhan around and wrenched his arms behind his back. With a swift, practiced motion, he clicked a pair of handcuffs around his wrists. It was over. For a long moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing. Aamir's hands were still shaking, his fingers sticky with blood. His or Rayhan's, he wasn't sure. His knees felt weak. He slumped against the wall, his heart pounding. Malik stood over Rayhan, panting. Blood trickled from his split lip, but his grip on the cuffs was solid. His eyes flickered toward Aamir. "You were never in danger," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not from me." Aamir swallowed hard, his throat dry. Then sirens. Red and blue lights flooded through the broken window. The distant wail of approaching police cars filled the air. As the backup officers stormed in, Malik took one last look at Aamir. Then, without another word, he stepped into the flashing lights and disappeared into the night.